Before everything fell apart, life was quiet, comfortable. My husband, David, ran a growing construction firm in Austin. People liked him. Steady, charming when he wanted to be. He wasn't flashy, just dependable. We lived in a modest brick home tucked into a neighborhood where kids still played in the yard and the neighbors waved when they passed by. We had our routines, coffee on the back porch, Sunday dinners, just the two of us, with laughter that lingered past dessert. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And in a world that spun faster than most of us could keep up, that felt like something solid. His family, though, always a little distant, not hostile, just polite, polished, like they'd memorized their lines and never missed a beat. I told myself it didn't matter. Not everyone clicks, right? Then came Thursday morning. The call woke me at 6:03 a.m. I remember the numbers, red and glowing on the clock. A woman's voice. Calm. Too calm. Mrs. Harmon, I'm calling from St. Joseph's. I'm sorry to inform you, your husband. He passed away this morning. The words didn't land. I said, there must be a mistake. I said it 3 times. I was still in pajamas when I drove to the hospital, hair matted, face bare. I parked crooked. I don't even remember locking the car. Inside, a nurse led me down a long hallway. Everything smelled of antiseptic and something heavier, the kind of air that only sits in rooms where people don't come back. He was lying there. Still. That stupid IV still taped to his arm, like someone thought he might wake up and need it. I touched his hand. It was colder than I expected. I whispered, David, come on. Enough. But he didn't move. His family was already there. His mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, but not a tear had fallen. His father nodded at me like a pastor greeting a new church member. We're all in shock, he said. But their eyes, they didn't match their words. There was something calculated, something waiting. That night, I sat in our empty house. I didn't cry. Not then. I just stared at the wall and thought, how does someone go from making coffee to being a memory in half a day? A week later, I got a call from David's lawyer. Just a routine reading, he said. Shouldn't take long. I walked in expecting paperwork, logistics, closure maybe. I had no reason to doubt anything. David and I talked about everything, or so I thought. The lawyer cleared his throat. Twice, then said, per David's final will and testament, dated April 11th, all assets, properties, and holdings are to be transferred to his immediate family. I laughed. Out loud. You mean, besides me? He shifted in his chair. You're not mentioned, ma'am. I looked at his parents. They didn't blink. His sister twisted her bracelet. His brother looked away. This has to be a mistake, I said. David wouldn't do that. But no one corrected it. No one offered to look into it. I walked out feeling like a ghost. Not angry, just erased. 2 days later, I drove back to our house. My house. The locks had been changed, boxes sat on the curb, my clothes, books, photo albums, soaked by the rain. A suitcase I hadn't used in years had burst open, my bras hanging out like trash. His sister stood on the porch, arms folded. You're trespassing, she said. Are you kidding me? She didn't answer. Just smiled, thin and sharp. I called the police. They arrived, took notes, then shrugged. Civil matter, one said. Best get a lawyer. I sat in my car, soaked, humiliated, and watched as she closed the door. My door, behind her. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in that car with the windows fogging up and the air turning cold. And somewhere around 3:00 a.m., I stopped crying. I started thinking, this wasn't grief. This was war. The next morning, I walked into a law office on South Congress. Not the one David had used. Someone new. Someone who didn't know me, or him, or the theater his family was putting on. The attorney listened carefully, then frowned. He amended the will 2 weeks before his death. That's sudden. Any signs he was planning something like that? No. Do you have any copies of the previous will? Not on paper, but I remember saving a PDF to a USB drive. Years ago, I backed everything up. Find it, he said, and be discreet. That night, I stared at my keys. The USB drive was in David's office. In the desk drawer he always kept locked. But I knew where the spare key was. I hid it there myself, taped behind the bookshelf. I turned off the lights, tied back my hair, and took a deep breath. That night, I decided to break into my own past. 3 days after the funeral, I pulled into the driveway of the house we once called home. My hands were steady on the wheel, but inside, I was crumbling in ways I couldn't explain. Part of me expected someone, anyone, to meet me at the door, to say, "We're so sorry. Come in. Rest." But when I slid the key into the lock, it didn't budge. I tried again. Nothing. The door opened from inside. It was Travis, David's brother. His smile wasn't warm, it was practiced. "We assumed you were staying with friends." He didn't move to let me in. Didn't ask how I was holding up. His body blocked the doorway like a wall that had been waiting to fall on me. "I came to get some things," I said, the words almost apologetic. He pointed over his shoulder. "We boxed them up. They're in the garage." That was it. No condolences. No acknowledgement that I had lived there, loved there. Just a cold dismissal. As I stepped toward the side door of the garage, something inside me pulled tight. Like a thread that had been frayed too long, you don't realize how little power you have until the door shuts on everything you built. The garage was already open. My boxes were stacked haphazardly, lids half off, cardboard soft from the rain that had come through the cracks in the roof. Clothes smelled musty, books curled at the edges. Our wedding photo lay face down in a puddle of water. The frame was cracked. I picked it up, wiped the glass with my sleeve. It sliced the side of my palm. I watched the blood pool for a second, then looked up. Serena stood at the upstairs window, arms folded, not moving. Just watching. No pity. No shame. I sat on the concrete, bleeding hand on my knee, staring at everything that had been my life in damp cardboard and broken glass. Not even a chair to sit on, just memories, stripped of meaning. I remembered the first night we moved in. David painted the kitchen that awful shade of yellow I hated. We laughed until our arms were sore. That was real, wasn't it? And yet, here I was, on the outside, realizing maybe it never really belonged to me. Maybe I'd just been allowed to stay. Until I wasn't. That evening, I met with the lawyer again. I told him everything, how fast it was, how none of it felt right. He pulled up some files, looked through public records. Turns out, a month before David died, the house had been quietly placed into a family trust. No co-signature, no notice, nothing ever mentioned to me. My name was gone, like it had never been there to begin with. "This isn't common," the lawyer said, scrolling. "Most couples don't hide things like this. Unless someone pressured him, or he had a reason." "What kind of reason?" I asked. He leaned back, unsure. Could be debt, could be fear, could be manipulation. The paperwork was clean, legally clean, anyway. But I saw the lawyer's face when he said, "We can challenge it. If there's proof it was done under duress." That word, proof, stuck in my throat. They hadn't just changed the will. They rewrote the map of everything I thought I understood. They planned this. Every last move. Later that night, I sat on the floor, tearing through the soggy boxes in the garage, looking for something, anything that proved my life wasn't a lie. In the bottom of a dented tin box, under some old receipts, I found the USB. It was scratched, but intact. I took it to the lawyer the next morning. He scanned it, opened the files. It held an older version of David's will, 2 years old. I was listed as sole beneficiary. He leaned forward. "This helps," he said, "but we still need to show what changed his mind. And why." I nodded. But inside, something shifted. This wasn't just about the house. It wasn't even about the money. It was about not being erased. That evening, I went back to the small apartment I'd been renting by the week. I turned off all the lights, curled up on the couch. The phone rang. Blocked number. I hesitated, then answered. The voice on the other end was low, gravelly, no greeting. "You don't know what he owed us," the voice said. Then silence. I woke with that voice still curling around my ears like smoke. "You don't know what he owed us." It was the kind of line that didn't let you sleep, didn't let you breathe without second-guessing every memory you ever trusted. I sat at the kitchen table of the tiny rental, clutching the USB like it was a lifeline, and not just plastic and circuits. The place was quiet, too quiet. The coffee I poured tasted like ash. I glanced at the empty chair across from me, David's old spot. There was no ghost sitting there, only absence. It stung more. I knew I couldn't stay still. That drive back to the house felt like walking towards something I wasn't sure I wanted to find, but I had to go. I needed answers, or closure, or maybe just proof that I hadn't lost my mind. I told myself I'd left something behind, just one small thing. That was the excuse I rehearsed. But when I pulled up to the house, the front yard already looked different, like it was shedding its skin. Through a cracked window, I spotted movers hauling out the furniture. The couch where David and I used to drink late-night wine, wrapped in plastic and halfway down the steps. Inside, I caught a glimpse of our wedding portrait lying on its side on the hallway floor. The frame was empty. It felt like watching my life be dismantled in real time. I slipped around back, toward the garage. Boxes lined the walls, trophies from David's childhood, a skateboard, stacks of clothes, all marked with masking tape and someone else's handwriting. It wasn't a home anymore. It was storage. Then, in the corner of the trash bin, something caught my eye. A manila folder, half-soaked. I pulled it out. Bellamy Estate, legacy papers. Tucked inside was a sealed envelope, official stamp across the flap. New version, effective immediately. I stood there, fingers shaking. There it was, another will. Another knife in the back. Signed, sealed, probably staged to make it all seem tidy. Serena appeared by the moving truck, directing men loading the grand piano. I walked straight up to her. "What is this?" I held up the folder. She smiled. Not warm, just polite enough to look legal. "Your husband wanted peace of mind. You weren't part of that peace." "Peace?" I said, louder than I intended. "That sounds like a line you rehearsed in front of your lawyer." Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes tightened. She turned her back like the conversation never happened. And that's when I noticed it, peeking out from the inside of her jacket pocket, red silk. The same fabric from the scarf David gave me on our first anniversary. We picked it together. She hadn't borrowed it. She'd taken it. They weren't just moving on. They were gutting everything I thought was mine. That night, I waited until the movers were long gone and the street went quiet. I parked 2 blocks away and walked back. Back entrance, old key still worked on that door. Inside the study, the air was heavy with dust and lemon polish. My feet sank into the carpet we chose together. I used to call it our grown-up room. I opened drawer after drawer, feeling like a burglar in my own history. And then I found it, an envelope tucked between books. My initials, dated 2 weeks before his death. My phone buzzed, blocked number again. I answered, nothing. Then a video message came through. It was surveillance footage, me, in that same room, knocking over a lamp. From last week. Cropped, grainy, edited. A title across the top. Widow breaks in, violent outburst. I stared at the screen, cold crawling up my spine. They were building a case, not in court, in perception, preparing to paint me as unstable, unhinged. They weaponized my grief, I whispered. I shoved the phone in my pocket, hands trembling, but not from fear anymore, from fury. I opened the envelope. Inside, a scanned draft of an older will. David's handwriting lined the margins. One note stood out, circled. S. Rain gets the house if I die first. They erased that. They buried it. I snapped a photo, sent it straight to Declan, my lawyer, my only ally in this. I stayed there in the dark for a while, not because I was scared, but because I was boiling inside. They thought I'd back down, disappear. But this wasn't over. I tucked the envelope into my coat, ready to leave. Then I froze. In the dim reflection on the glass door, a silhouette appeared behind me. The morning light meant nothing. I'd barely slept. That shadow behind me from the night before, it wasn't just a figure, it was a reminder. Someone was always there, watching, waiting. My phone buzzed on the counter. One notification, a photo, from Serena's account. No caption, just a close-up of the red silk scarf, the same one I saw peeking out of her jacket, the one that used to be mine, now neatly folded on my doorstep. That wasn't coincidence. It was a message, a warning, a game. I stood there, robe still tied, heart pulsing slow and heavy in my chest. Then I reached for the closet. Jeans, neutral top, hair pulled back, face plain, no makeup. If she wanted me on edge, she wouldn't get it. I'd be unreadable. The house still stood like it didn't know anything had changed. Mid-morning, I pulled into the driveway, same excuse in my back pocket, left something small behind. No one questioned me. No one even showed. It was quiet. Too quiet. A kind of stillness that didn't settle. It watched. I stepped into the study. Dust had already started to gather on the wood shelves. On the desk, our wedding photo sat framed, but when I moved closer, I saw something I hadn't before, reflected in the glass behind us, barely visible, a silhouette of Serena standing in the background, her eyes locked on us, on me. That wasn't old. On the desk beside it, a guest book laid open, plans for the upcoming gala. I flipped through. My name wasn't there, not once. I turned to the wall. There used to be a painting of Orville, David's father, above the fireplace. Now, a new portrait hung in its place, larger, sharper. Lucian, in a dark tailored suit, arms folded like a politician. A gold plaque read, "Future Patriarch." I blinked. Future Patriarch? Orville wasn't even cold in the ground, but they'd already moved him aside, literally. It was like they'd rewritten the family history and skipped over everything that didn't fit the narrative, including me. That afternoon, back at the rental, a courier knocked, thick envelope, hand-delivered, formal invitation, black script on white linen. To the Bellamy family only. There it was again, the line they kept drawing and erasing me from. I called Declan. "It's a private event," he said, "not grounds for legal action, but optics matter. They're closing the circle in public." "And if I go anyway?" I asked. "They'll hate it, but they can't stop you." I didn't need permission. What I needed was presence. If they erase me from the room, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who's being silenced. That evening, I drove to the venue. High-end, of course, crystal chandeliers behind wide windows. Laughter floated out into the street like nothing bad had ever happened. I parked down the block. Watched couples exit limos in polished shoes and floor-length gowns. Waiters greeted guests with practiced smiles. Serena's voice echoed in my memory. "You weren't part of the plan." I got out of the car, walked past the line, around the back. No one noticed a woman walking through the staff entrance. One of the caterers stepped out for a smoke. I slipped in before the door clicked shut behind him. Inside, the air changed. It was warm, perfumed, alive with the sound of money and memory, gold lights, tall tables, champagne flutes. On the walls, framed photos lined the perimeter. Not one of Orville. Instead, Lucian and Margot. Posed like royalty, accepting handshakes, standing behind podiums, laughing into cameras. I moved slowly. My heels made no sound. I didn't speak, just watched. Then came the slideshow. The projector whirred to life, a tribute. David's voice narrated the first few photos, ones I recognized from old family albums. Except, I wasn't in any of them, not even the wedding. Photos cropped, scenes cut, phrases edited. No mention of wife, just vague references to those who supported him. Serena stood near the bar, champagne in hand. Her eyes met mine across the room. She didn't flinch. She raised her glass and took a slow sip. Applause erupted as the montage ended. I stood in the center of a crowd that pretended not to see me, pretended I never existed. But I did exist, and they were going to remember it. I turned and walked toward the exit, past the glitter. Past the lies, down a hallway, darker than the rest. Then I heard it. Click. The sound of a camera shutter behind me. I turned. Serena's photographer stood there, flash ready. Not startled, like he'd been waiting. I sat in the dark, the glow from my phone screen washing my face in cold light. The gala slideshow played again in my mind. Every photo without me, every memory cut clean, like I never existed in that house, in that marriage, in that life. I scrolled through my own photos, clinging to moments I once took for granted. His hand in mine, his voice in the background, smiles that used to mean something. My phone buzzed again. Blocked number. A single image. Me, walking out of the staff hallway at the gala, time-stamped. The angle was close. Closer than any security camera would have allowed. Someone followed me. Not just at the gala, since, that night, I slept with the hallway light on. Didn't help much. The next morning, a knock at my door pulled me from sleep, not pounding, just firm. 2 officers stood there, polite but not friendly. "Isla Rain?" one asked. I nodded. "We've had a report of trespassing on private property, the Bellamy estate." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "The gala," the second one said. "You entered through a staff entrance. The property owner has filed a formal report." I stood barefoot in my living room, wearing a college sweatshirt and shame. "I was his wife," I said, more confused than angry. "I belonged there more than most of those people." "You're not listed on the trust," the officer replied, his voice like dry paper. "You're considered a civilian." The word clanged. Civilian. Like I'd wandered into enemy territory, like I was never part of the war to begin with. They asked me to come to the station. Voluntary, they said. Just a statement. But the weight of it, being escorted out of my apartment like I'd done something wrong, was heavier than any metal handcuffs. At the station, I learned what I expected. Serena filed the report. Of course she did. She didn't come after me at the gala. She waited until she could come after me legally. Clean hands, dirty intent. By afternoon, I was in Declan's office, sitting across from him while he reviewed the officer's summary. He looked up slowly. "This isn't random," he said. "They're building something. Coordinated. First the video, then the cops, now this." "They want me to lose it in public," I said quietly. "They want me to look unhinged." He nodded. "That way, anything you say later won't matter." I leaned forward. "Then I guess it's time I said something they can't ignore." He hesitated. "You sure?" I didn't blink. "File a motion. Subpoena every document from the estate, especially Serena's role in the changes." Declan scribbled a note. "We'll need leverage." I told him about the staff, 2 former housekeepers. They'd seen Serena, weeks before Orville passed, pull files from the safe in his study. One of them remembered the folder, red leather, embossed with the Bellamy seal. I'd already contacted them. They were willing to sign statements. And then I remembered something else. The envelope, the one with Orville's handwriting, the clause he amended, removing Serena from guardianship due to irreconcilable personal concerns. I'd had it digitally scanned, notarized, just in case. Declan's eyes flicked up. "That's a start, a strong one." I didn't smile. There was no victory yet, but for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like prey. That night, I was back in my apartment, lights dimmed low. Quiet. Still. Around 9, a knock came again. No one at the door. Just a small package. No return address. Inside, 1 page, torn from a leather-bound journal. Familiar penmanship. Orville's. 1 sentence, circled in red ink. She was never part of the bloodline. I didn't move, didn't cry. I just stood there, holding the page in one hand. In the other, my phone, already dialing Declan. Then, as I folded the page to put it away, something slipped out. A black and white photograph. Me. Pregnant. Declan called me abruptly around noon, voice tight, asking me to come into his office immediately. My stomach twisted as I drove across town. He slid over a set of digital records across his desk. "Look at this," he murmured. He pointed to one document, the trust instrument dated just after Orville's death. A clause for spousal support had vanished. The day before probate. My name, obligations owed to me, all removed. Then he showed a log of computer activity. Late-night access to the file system, originating from Serena's assistant's credentials. Someone covered their tracks, but not well enough. I felt betrayal. Not just from Serena, but from the system that allowed her to erase me. Declan paused. I closed my eyes, remembering Orville's promise. I'll take care of you, even if you bail me out instead. That memory stung under new light. Later, I sat in a corner booth at an old cafe, Lydia across from me. Lydia and I used to talk for hours in college. I hadn't reached out in years, until now. She looked older, serious. She slid over a printout, internal transfers labeled security adjustment, nearly 10 million. She said, "This moved through Bellamy accounts. A few wires vanished into thin air." She pulled up her phone. She had forwarded an email thread. Serena instructing an associate, "Clear Isla out before probate. We'll deal with fallout later." Lydia's voice trembled slightly. "I didn't want to believe I was part of it," she said. Twist. She was the one giving me the insight no one else trusted to speak. I watched her eyes. She was scared. But she agreed. She would testify. I nodded. Shock had sharpened into resolve. This was beyond grief now. At dusk, I drove toward the Bellamy estate. I didn't go there to ask forgiveness. I went to draw a line. The gate loomed ahead, black iron, silent watchers behind it. I clicked open my car door, stepped in front of the security camera. I lifted my voice. "You erased me from his story. You can't erase what I know now, or who I've become." The gate didn't open. I turned and walked to the mailbox. Inside, I left a letter addressed to Serena, neatly typed. It listed the discoveries: the tampered trust document, Lydia's evidence, the email thread, and my demand. Respond in 48 hours, or I take it public. I pressed my fingers to the plaque. Cold metal. I walked away, knowing lines were crossed that night. The power had begun to shift. Night came with a shiver. My phone buzzed. 3 missed calls, all from blocked numbers. I glanced at the wall clock. 3 a.m. Later, a buzz at the front desk of my apartment building. Someone had tried to activate the intercom with no name. The concierge denied entry. My heart beat fast, but I kept calm. I filed a police report silently, resisting the urge to panic. Declan called me soon after. "They're nervous now," he said. "When they're scared, they slip up." We began preparing for court, motions, depositions, filings. The fight was now official. Then, as I watched my phone's screen, an email popped in. Subject: "I didn't know. Please let me explain." From Edward, Orville's brother. The body contained a scanned handwritten letter. Orville addressed me, never mailed. I held my breath reading the first line. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. But I want you to know what they planned." My fingers trembled. That changes everything. The letter from Edward was written in Orville's own hand, the ink uneven in spots, like his hand had shaken. He suspected Serena had been pressuring him and said she'd been slipping legal adjustments into paperwork under the guise of convenience. He wrote, "She asked me to make changes. I told her no. That should have been enough." But it wasn't. At the end, he mentioned a safe deposit box in my name. Declan helped me access it. Inside, the air was stale and cold. There lay the original will, untouched, and a USB drive. We took the document straight to his office. The will was dated and signed 3 months before his death. My name sat plainly under co-trustee of the Bellamy properties and accounts. The USB? Recordings. Orville speaking softly, sometimes struggling for air. One entry. "If this ever gets twisted, if I'm not around, Isla is my legal wife, my partner. Don't let Serena change that." The sound of his voice broke something in me, and then hardened everything else. The next morning, I sent a redacted copy of the will to Serena's attorney. I expected a reply. Instead, I got silence. Until the following day. A formal invitation to meet at her lawyer's office. They called it a path to reconciliation. I brought Declan and Lydia with me. Serena showed up in pearls and black cashmere, calm as if she hadn't gutted my life. A PR advisor sat beside her, young, smug. They tried to smile through the tension. Serena said, "Let's be practical. We all want to move forward." Then came their offer, hush money and a quiet deed to a modest estate out of state. I didn't flinch. "You don't get to buy silence anymore," I said. Her lawyer coughed, awkward. Declan closed his binder and said, "We're done here." Serena didn't look surprised, just annoyed, like a woman watching a chessboard shift. That evening, I sat at a folding table in a dim-lit community center across town. A support group, women, older, younger, telling stories that mirrored my own. Manipulated out of their homes, estates, names scrubbed from documents by in-laws or stepchildren. One woman, Grace, spoke about her son, manipulated out of everything by his uncle. I looked around and felt rage turn into clarity. This wasn't just about me anymore. I reached out that night to a journalist I remembered from a local expose on elder estate abuse. She agreed to meet. Lydia confirmed she'd testify. Declan warned, "They'll come hard, Isla. You'll be dragged." I nodded. Let them try. He started drafting the litigation strategy. I went home that night and pulled out every file Orville left behind. In one folder labeled, "For Isla, if I'm not around," was a photo of us laughing on a beach, and a handwritten quote. "Don't let their shame become your silence." I held that paper like it was breath itself. The next night, after dinner, I returned home. The door was unlocked. I froze. Nothing was missing, but drawers had been emptied, files dumped, clothes tossed, a chair knocked over. The police came quickly. "Nothing stolen. Looks like intimidation," one officer said. No prints, no footage from the hallway camera. System had conveniently glitched. On the kitchen table, one post-it note, center placed. "Walk away." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stood in that chaos, took one deep breath, and whispered, "They should have cleaned better. They missed what I found." First day of trial. I showed up before the courthouse even opened, standing with Declan and Lydia as the press vultures swarmed the steps like it was feeding hour. Some held cameras, some just held up phones. One voice cut through the crowd. "Is this about money or revenge, Mrs. Rain?" I kept walking. Inside, Serena sat like royalty. Dark navy dress, no jewelry, just that subtle smirk she wore whenever she thought she'd won before the game even started. Her lawyer, polished, silver hair, no soul, stood to open with a calm that bordered on smugness. This is a case of a grieving widow, confusing grief for entitlement. That's how he framed it. Then Declan stood. No theatrics, no volume, just truth. "We'll show the jury a trail of documents, missing ones, forged ones, altered ones. We'll show the court a family legacy gutted for control, and we'll show how the woman most betrayed never once asked for $1 more than she was owed." The courtroom was cold. Not just the air, the stares, the silence, but I sat steady. Lydia was first to testify. Calm, direct. She laid out Serena's transaction history, how assets were liquidated days before Orville's death. Declan walked her through it with surgical precision. Then came Serena's assistant, pale, younger, clearly out of her depth. She tried to stick to the script, but when Declan pressed her on file access timestamps, she cracked. "I was following Serena's orders," she blurted. Dead silence. The judge had to call for order. Serena didn't even look her way. That moment, that snap in the room, it felt like breath-filling lungs that had been held too long. It wasn't over, but for the first time, they looked nervous. I took the stand with the letter in my hand. Declan queued up the USB and played a clip. Orville's voice, scratchy, tired. "If this gets out, it's because I failed to protect the one I love." You could hear a pin drop. No coughs, no whispers. Just stillness. Then came his final message. "Isla, use what I gave you to free yourself." I didn't cry. I didn't need to. I looked at the jury, and they were listening now. Not just hearing, listening. During recess, Serena made her move. Press huddled outside, cameras rolling. She stood with her lawyer and said, "This is a woman who's twisted my brother's death for personal gain." I didn't flinch. I just said, "You can't twist what was already broken." Declan pulled me aside later. "Edward's in," he said. "If she lies again, he's ready to testify." That night, I got a voicemail from Edward. Just one line. "Whatever it costs me, she's not burying the truth this time." The next morning, the gallery was packed. Press, legal aides, people who just wanted a glimpse. The judge gave both sides 15 more minutes to prepare rebuttals before adjourning for the day. Serena's attorney stood, smug again. "Your Honor, we request a new character witness, someone relevant to both the prior and current wills." The doors opened. It was Gerald, Orville's childhood friend. The man I hadn't seen in 2 years. The executor of the older will. The one Serena claimed had been lost in a fire. He walked in slowly, nodded at the judge, then glanced at me. Just once. I gripped the table. Because Gerald. He was the only one who knew what Orville truly feared at the end. The verdict came down mid-morning. Courtroom packed. Press clustered outside like vultures waiting to pounce. The judge didn't dramatize it, just spoke the truth aloud, clear and final. All claims upheld. Full restitution granted to Mrs. Isla Rain. All assets under dispute are to be returned as outlined in the verified original will. The court recognizes intentional fraud by Ms. Serena Bellamy, now pending federal charges. I exhaled for the first time in months. Outside, the crowd split. Some clapped. Others scowled, shaking their heads like they knew better. One man muttered, "$70 million for a widow? That's justice now?" Declan leaned close. "They don't know what it cost you." I nodded once. Didn't need to explain. That silence, that ache of every ignored red flag, every dinner alone, every night wondering if love had been a lie, cost more than any dollar amount. Later that evening, I released a public letter. I didn't name Serena. I didn't drag her through the mud. I just spoke plainly. "I'm reclaiming my name. I'm not here to shame anyone, but I will no longer let silence speak louder than the truth." 2 days later, Serena was sentenced. Federal prison. 6 years. Forgery. Financial abuse. Obstruction of probate court. Her expression was blank as they let her out. Still no apology. Still no understanding. That's when I finally let go of the anger. It was over. I won. Not the money, the clarity. I moved north not long after. A small coastal cottage in Monterey Bay. Quiet, weathered, not much bigger than a 2-bedroom apartment, but every inch of it felt like breathing room. The ocean was right there, folding into itself every morning. I started teaching workshops at a community center. Estate literacy for widows and single mothers. We covered basics, wills, trusts, red flags, conversations families avoid until it's too late. The room stayed packed. People came with notes, tears, stories. One woman hugged me and said, "I didn't even know I was allowed to ask questions." I quoted Eleanor Roosevelt one day, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." The women all nodded. A few months in, I got a letter. Anonymous donor had set up a scholarship fund under Orville's name. A few weeks later, another envelope came from an old legal firm Orville used years ago. Enclosed was a deed transfer. And a mission statement. The Rain Trust. Turns out Orville had started it quietly. He wanted it to help those too often left behind when wealth speaks louder than grief. It was mine now. To lead. To protect. To grow. He didn't just leave me a fight. He left me a calling. One afternoon, a letter came with prison stamps. "Serena." Just one line that mattered. "You were always good at playing the long game." No apology, no remorse. I read it once, burned it twice. Edward visited later that month. Brought a pie. Didn't stay long. "I appreciate you not dragging my name through the mess," he said. No, I didn't help much. I was scared." "I know," I replied. "You're not the only one." He left quietly. There'd be no future friendship, but there was peace now, and that was enough. I visited Orville's grave before fall came. The sky was soft, the wind warm. I placed the court's final ruling at the foot of his headstone. "We finally did it," I whispered. "You weren't crazy, and I wasn't weak." A week later, we held a gathering at the beach. Me, Lydia, Declan, a few from the workshops. Just a circle. Nothing fancy. I read from a notebook I'd started after the trial ended. I lost everything to find what mattered. The waves were high that day. Kids from the center ran back and forth through the foam. One little girl, maybe 7, handed me a folded paper. Her drawing. It was me, standing under a big sun. She'd labeled it, "Strong Lady." I laughed, genuinely laughed. Lydia elbowed me. "Your story's a book now. You realize that, right?" I shrugged. "Let's call it Justice Served Cold." We toasted with cheap wine and hummed old Motown. A few months passed, quiet, steady. I wrote an article, anonymously, for a national paper on estate abuse and manipulation. A journalist picked it up. A week later, CNN ran a short segment. My words weren't credited by name, but I knew them. I didn't need fame. I just needed the truth to have a place to live. The last image I'll leave you with. Me, standing under a fading sunset, speaking to a group of women sitting on folding chairs in the sand. The wind carries our words out over the tide. What they took was money. What I found was everything else.